In 1865, Adam Moroney's Irish ancestors escaped poverty and travelled halfway around the world to Myrtleford in Victoria. Lured by the dream of striking it rich on the goldfields, within 2 generations this staunch Catholic family would make the ultimate sacrifice for the country they now called home. Born in Myrtleford in 1895, Mick, as the family referred to him, was the 3rd Moroney ancestor to be given the name Michael.
Mick was my great uncle, one of those guys that's been remembered very fondly by the family over the years. Actually, he left home in 1913 and went to Tura in Gippsland, where he played some AFL football for a while, before going on to a job at the Mount Lyell copper mine in Queenstown, Tasmania. Tasmania is where he enlisted, so he went off to war without any of his mates from Myrtleford. He went through all the major battles at Gallipoli and in the Somme Valley about a year after that. He was wounded there a couple of times. One of his injuries was actually a broken fibula, and I'm wondering, how did he break his leg in battle? Subsequently, I discovered there was a sports day on behind the lines that day where they had matches of AFL football between the troops. So no doubt Mick broke his leg playing football behind the lines. Right towards the end of the war, when the big offensive was on against the Germans on the Hindenburg line, Mick jumped out of the trenches at 6:30 one morning and 10 minutes later was hit in the abdomen by a friendly artillery shell. He was put in a shell ditch and then he was transferred to a casualty clearing station where he succumbed to his wounds the next day. His nurse wrote a letter to the family about his last hours. She said he was badly wounded but cheerful until he fell unconscious an hour before he died. His death was a real tragedy. He'd lasted 4 years in the war and was killed in the last battle that the Australians fought in. The next day, they were all demobilised and sent behind the lines. Mick is buried in the British War Cemetery at Tincourt in France, about 4 miles away from where he died. His legacy? Well, the family was obviously very distraught with the loss of their oldest son, but he had been sending home 60% of his army pay to them throughout the course of the war. And after his death, the gratuity and deferred payment they received was over £200, which was quite a lot of money in those days. What it meant for Mick's parents, Michael II and Julia, was that they could take out a lease on 20 acres of land here at Bowidgee Creek, where they lived out their lives. When I think of my ancestors, I think I take a lot from each of them. The adventurer larrikin in Mick is great. The worker in Michael II is tremendous. And as for Michael I, to travel halfway around the world for a new life with no wealth, no comforts, no education, how courageous was that? I take a lot from them all, but I think Mick's my favourite.